I'm Chance Dorland, and this is The Docket, our weekly interview program covering law and crime in San Antonio from expressnews.com, brought to you today by the law offices of Pat Maloney. A San Antonio jury took just 25 minutes to sentence a man to 70 years in prison for killing and burning his ex-girlfriend in a case that was the first 2019 murder trial for Bexar County. I'm joined now by San Antonio Express News courts and crime reporter Elizabeth Zavala to hear details about what used to be a cold case. Liz, great to have you back here on the program. Tell me about this very interesting trial to start off 2019.
Yes, Chance. This was a trial that lasted a week, as you said, the first one of the year. And this is about this happened a little before 5 a.m. on August 17th, 2015, when a man on his way to work found a body burning on the side of W.W. White Road in southeast Bexar County. He called 911 and reported it, and when Bexar County Sheriff's deputies arrived, they found the body still burning. They determined it to be a woman's body that was partially clothed, but they found no identifying documents, and that was more than 3 years ago.
And so that's why this is considered a cold case, I assume, correct?
Yes. This body had been burned, and there was no identification again, but just a bracelet, necklace, and earrings. And the sheriff's office actually at that time released photographs of those items in the hopes that someone in the public could recognize them and be able to help them find out who she was. And months went by, and in March of 2016, about 6 months after the death, the Bexar County Sheriff's Office released a composite sketch that was drawn by a forensic artist who had examined the remains. And they were also able to find a fraction of a fingerprint. So by December of 2016, authorities were able to identify her as Lisa R. Carter, who was 47 years old. And her identity had remained a mystery all that time. She had been struck at least 3 times in the head, and her body had been doused with gasoline and set on fire. So the University of North Texas Health Science Center sent a missing persons DNA database report to a sheriff's investigator saying that they analyzed Carter's DNA after it was sent to them by the Bexar County medical examiner. So when they ran Carter's data through combined DNA index system, which everybody knows as CODIS, the University of North Texas was notified that there was an association between Carter and the unidentified human remains. And this happened about a year and 3 months after her death. So there was a lot of really, what I find to be really interesting things going on to try to identify this poor woman's body because she had been burned so much.
Yeah, not to make light of anything, because obviously a woman is dead. This was a murder trial that ended in a conviction, very tragic circumstances. But what you just described really does almost seem like an episode of CSI. This is very different than a lot of the cases that we've talked about. And of course, all of that work, all of that investigation was done so that they could find who they thought was behind the crime, who now has been convicted. So when did authorities arrest Nunez? Was it after they identified this victim?
Well, yeah, that is actually pretty interesting. There were a lot of different things that came into how this arrest happened, and some of it we actually found out during trial. But about a month after they identified Lisa Carter's body, sheriff's deputies arrested Antonio Nunez Jr. It was revealed then that Nunez and Carter had known each other about 15 years and had been in somewhat of a violent relationship on and off. So Nunez was actually in jail for 3 months prior to Carter's death after she had accused him of assault. She, called authorities. They got into some sort of altercation, and they came and they arrested him and they put him in jail. And he spent 90 days incarcerated here in San Antonio. But she later decided not to proceed, and the charges ended up being dismissed.
Wow, that's really unfortunate to hear that. Obviously, we know how this situation turned out. So he was in jail, was released, ended up, I guess you can say now, since he's been convicted, murdering her. But of course, there was a trial. It lasted about a week, and the jury deliberated almost not at all. Tell me about that.
Yes, this was a very interesting trial, just because of all of the things that we've talked about so far. And yes, it did last about a week. It was the first murder trial again, which was great because, as you know, they had such changeover at the courthouse. There hadn't really been a whole lot going on with the big changes, and then of course with the holidays. But felony impact court, where Judge Laura Parker presides, had this case, and it ended up being a tough trial for the jury, Chance, because we had to see photographs of Lisa Carter's remains, and there were just several photographs that were shown at the scene. You could actually still see where the body, you can see smoke coming from the body. And there were some close-up photographs that showed just, what you could only imagine, something this horrible would look like. So almost immediately after some of these really gruesome photographs came up, one of the jurors asked for a break. And Judge Parker looked over and said, okay, let's go ahead and have a break. So the panel rose to leave the courtroom, and one of the jurors actually passed out. And they had to clear the courtroom so that emergency medical services people could come in and check out the situation. But as things work, the person who was testifying at the time happened to be a deputy medical examiner. So he basically just came off of the bench and, went to the aid of this male juror who, had to be released from service ultimately, and an alternate took over. So that was, a pretty dramatic, situation that happened in court and, during a trial that already had a lot of really intense information and just some really graphic photographs in it already. So during the trial, testimony established that Nunez told his sister and some other relatives that he killed Lisa Carter and threw her to the wolves. And this is actual words that were used in court by witnesses, and actually that the jurors were able to hear both in audio and in video from Mr. Nunez himself. He told police later on, when he was confronted by them, that when those witnesses stepped forward, Nunez said he really didn't mean he killed her in the literal sense. He said he meant he killed her by throwing her out of his house, therefore throwing her to the unknown outside, which he referred to as wolves. And actually, there was a Spanish phrase that he used a few times in the audio and in the video that was shown, but I couldn't even repeat it to you simply because a lot of times you can't really hear a whole lot of of what is being said on some of these recordings because, it's a big, the courtroom is big and there's other outside noise and things like that. But it was really very interesting to hear that he said, yes, I said I killed her, but I really didn't mean that I had killed her. So, that was kind of an interesting take on the interview.
Yeah, it's sometimes you have confessions and then the defense says, they were forced or, the defendant didn't know what he or she was doing. But yeah, just a straight confession, but then people say, no, that's what was said, but that's not what was meant. I could see how that would be really interesting evidence from a juror's perspective. And then as the trial moved forward, so obviously this murder did happen. They found the body, but the defense said that Nunez was not responsible, and the prosecution disagreed. So, what was the argument from both sides for why the murder had happened, or why Nunez was or was not involved?
Well, this is very interesting. Nunez's attorney, John Economidis, told the jury that his client was innocent, and he attempted to pin the actual crime on an alleged member of the Aryan Brotherhood who happened to live nearby where the body was found burning. And prosecutors Leo Gonzalez and Melissa Sines argued that Nunez's main motive was revenge for bringing an assault charge against him. And they pointed to the fact that he got out of jail in July and the death occurred actually in August, barely a month afterward. So they pretty much scoffed and, told the jury in their arguments that, man, this story about this Aryan Brotherhood link, was tentative at best, and they argued that there was really no basis for that. That there were, things that were shown in the photos that that showed that this could have happened, just based upon what they had seen, and then just the main fact that nobody really, who says they kill somebody, but then they take it back. That's just not language that anybody really has. That you walk around saying, "Well, I killed him," or "I killed her," but I didn't mean it. They kept making that particular point in their argument.
And then also specifically, aside from, yeah, that phrase that you just mentioned, I could see how that would be a big piece of evidence. Hard to get around that. I believe there were some items associated with the home of Nunez that prosecutors said were involved with this murder, correct?
Yes. Testimony established that Mr. Nunez had replaced the floor and the carpet in his home and also sold a vehicle not long after Carter was killed. So, the arguments that prosecutors made at that point, was okay, all right, we're not able to really find anything here, but look at the timeline. You know, her body was found at this particular time, and then, you have a year and a half maybe that has passed, that, a lot of things have happened. And, when you bring up, documents that show, or photographs that show new flooring and new carpeting in the home, and then, documents that a vehicle was sold, that kind of, is something that, jurors, they're always paying such attention. They're gonna kind of stick on that thing. And then Nunez himself, in speaking with sheriff's investigators, admitted that he had a shovel, a machete, and an axe in his home, and some of which were seen in photos. Lots of different types of tools that that he had, that prosecutors pointed out to, that any of these items could have been used, for the blunt force trauma that occurred on Miss Carter. Any of that could have been used. So, there were all of these things that were shown and discussed as part of testimony. And, so the witness testimony, his admission on video that he indeed said the words, "I killed her," seemed to resonate with the jury, which, took about 5 hours to find him guilty of murder. And, in those 5 hours, jurors, they will discuss the testimony that they've heard. Many times when we're sitting outside in the gallery waiting for these verdicts in the 2-phase trial, they can send out questions and they can ask, to have testimony reread to them, on particular, days or during particular hours when, a particular theme was being discussed. And also, they're able to watch videos or listen again to audio. So, jurors are usually very busy when they're doing that sort of deliberation. So, again, took about 5 hours to find Antonio Nunez Jr. guilty of murder. And then this same jury turned around, Chance, and took only 25 minutes to sentence him to 70 years in prison. So Mr. Nunez is now 63 years old. And because of the sentence that he received, he will have to serve 30 years before he is eligible for parole. And eligibility isn't always a guarantee, but again, he's 63 now. He's going to be 93 years old before he's going to be eligible for parole. So, that is definitely a long time.
And then, Liz, before we say goodbye, I guess the only remaining question I have is that for a case that, to use a phrase like this, but I think it rings true here, was such a slam dunk for the prosecution. It didn't take long to convict. It certainly didn't take long to figure out the sentencing for this individual. Why was there no death penalty on the table?
Well, Chance, this was a murder case. Now, in Texas, a capital offense, like if you kill a police officer or if you kill someone while you're committing another crime, like for instance, some of the capital cases we've talked about have been about people who it's been an armed robbery that turned into murder or a killing, or if it's like a drug deal, we use the phrase a drug deal gone bad. So if you were already committing a crime and you killed somebody, that can be brought as a capital murder charge. And in Texas, capital murder is punishable by death or life in prison without the possibility of parole. Now, Mr. Nunez was charged with murder, which is a first degree felony, which is punishable by 5 to 99 years or life in prison. So that 30-year sentence, he's going to the 30 years he'll have to serve before he is eligible for parole is really, it is a life sentence, but life many times is just, they count life as 60 years. So, because he is eligible, he would be eligible for parole, he'd have to serve half of that. So, the only other capital offense that I didn't mention that, we have also discussed is if you kill a child under 10, that is considered a capital offense, which again, capital offenses are punishable by life in prison without the possibility of parole or death.
And And thank you to San Antonio Express News courts and crime reporter Elizabeth Zavala for joining me for today's episode of The Docket, our weekly interview program covering law and crime in San Antonio from expressnews.com. Brought to you today by the law offices of Pat Maloney. For the San Antonio Express News, I'm Chance Dorland.